They work in silence, but they always get their man.
We're known as the silent service, but once you know an inspector, you'll never forget it.
Gun! Drop the gun! Let me see your hands! Let me see your hands!
Few have heard of them, yet their service dates from before America was born.
We're the nation's oldest federal law enforcement agency.
From the days of the stagecoach to the era of train robberies and the age of airmail and email, their job has remained the same: to fight crime.
People steal through the mail. People even try to kill through the mail. It's our job to stop them.
Don't move! Do not move!
Now, go inside one of America's elite crime-fighting agencies as modern-day detectives try to live up to the legends of the Silent Service. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and someone's about to get a special delivery. An illegal drug ring is operating out of an ordinary-looking house, and a shipment of cocaine is being delivered by U.S. mail. But someone is watching, and they're not ordinary law enforcement. Inspector Lou DiRienzo is listening to a transmitter inside the package. The moment it's opened, he can move in because receiving drugs by mail is a federal crime, which calls for special federal agents.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Police, search warrant! Search warrant! Police, search warrant!
At that point, myself, my partner, and additional agents entered the house and started clearing the residence.
It's not safe or routine.
There's always a possibility that someone might be waiting for you. They might be dangerous.
Clear!
In this case, someone is waiting with a weapon.
Police, search warrant! Gun! Drop the gun! Police! Don't hands! Don't hands! Do not move! Get your hands up!
With 3 shots, DiRienzo subdues the suspect, who is injured but lives.
Medic, need a medic!
An illegal drug operation has been put out of business. But by who? They're not cops, not FBI. They're postal inspectors, the nation's oldest federal law enforcement service, and probably the least understood.
Whenever I tell people I'm a postal inspector, they want to know what kind of mail I inspect or which post office I work at.
Usually get a wisecrack, or they'll make some comment about, well, the mail's okay, or are you here to count stamps, things like that.
I've actually received letters addressed to Ron Pry, Coastal Inspector. So people don't know really what a postal inspector does.
Inspectors are the police force, if you will, in the Postal Service, and that means they identify crimes, they track down criminals.
We carry firearms, make arrests, serve subpoenas, federal search warrants, the whole 9 yards.
Today, there are around 2,000 postal inspectors stationed throughout the United States. Their service is older than the nation, and they were among the trailblazers who helped build it. It all began in 1772, when Deputy Postmaster General Benjamin Franklin began what would become the Postal Inspection Service. Much of America was still a wilderness. By forging new mail routes from city to city, the Postal Service would build the country's first communications network.
Individuals, they were called surveyors, they surveyed postal routes, making sure they were safe and adequate for the delivery of mail through the colonies.
Slowly, colony was connected to colony, and the mail passing through them included newspapers, and eventually important correspondence about breaking with Britain.
A printer shop or a tavern could have served as a post office. It was a community meeting place. And then it would be given to a post rider who would have put it into a satchel, a leather satchel, and carried it with him.
The first postal inspectors were always on the move, eating and sleeping wherever they could. It was a lonely life, exposed to the elements and other dangers.
You have a lone rider on a dark road, he would be a natural target for brigands or thieves or robbers.
The National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. holds a rich trove of stories, artifacts, and mementos of the 230-year history of the Postal Inspection Service. Stories like the legendary lawman who single-handedly took on the Wild West, the notorious stagecoach robbery that helped pioneer crime-solving forensics, and the charming swindler who would give an infamous name to an ingenious scam, the Ponzi scheme. Modern postal inspectors like Lou DiRienzo have a lot to live up to, and their cases can be just as challenging. June 23, 2003, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. DiRienzo gets a case that will require every tool in the postal inspector's arsenal. A letter carrier has been found shot to death next to his truck. Murder is usually the domain of local police, but when the victim is a postal employee, the postal inspectors take the lead.
Part of the duties of a postal inspector are to investigate crimes against the Postal Service. We protect postal employees.
On the scene, DiRienzo works with fellow inspectors and local police to try to figure out what happened.
We found out that a letter carrier had been shot, likely in the back. A couple witnesses heard the bang and saw the letter carrier fall. He was found by a witness lying behind the vehicle. One shot, I'm not really sure where it came from. Nobody saw anybody running from the area. Then it appeared that there was a robbery. He still his wallet with him, things like that.
The name of that letter carrier, Clayton Smith. Fingerprints on the mail truck matched the dead letter carrier, but no one else.
We conducted a thorough search of the entire scene and the surrounding area, and there was really no physical evidence that we were able to recover.
No shell casings, no fingerprints, no gun, no motive.
We talked to Clayton Smith's family, tried to learn maybe a motive, if anybody had any reason to go after Mr. Smith. And talking to neighborhood residents, we learned that the letter carrier might have had some problems with some people in the neighborhood, so we also had that avenue that we had to look into.
But nothing pans out. In the area near the crime, many people heard the shot, but no one saw anything.
Basically, we had more questions than answers.
There were so many suspects, and we weren't really sure from the beginning, was it a random street crime or a robbery gone bad, or was there something more sinister there, something planned? You had those questions.
It may all come down to the only piece of physical evidence in hand: the bullet taken from Clayton Smith's body. Just outside of Washington, D.C.'s Dulles International Airport is an enormous facility where postal inspectors conduct forensic analysis.
The crime lab at Dulles is a full crime lab. They do fingerprint analysis, handwriting analysis. They can recover fingerprints. They do forensic analysis of bombs, of parcels. They have experts there on forgeries. So it's basically a full-service crime lab.
And because inspectors protect postal employees as well as the mail they carry, the facility also has a ballistics lab. Each gun makes unique markings on the bullets it fires, like a fingerprint. The technicians at Dulles don't have the gun used to fire the lethal bullet into Clayton Smith, but they can narrow it down to a brand.
The bullet likely came from a Brico or a Lorson 380 caliber weapon. So we had a pretty good idea of what type of gun we were looking for.
Now all they need is the gun. Inspector DiRienzo knows that gun crimes are as old as the inspection service itself. And while his job may feel like the Wild West sometimes, there in fact was an inspector in the Old West whose bold action against a series of gun crimes would make him a legend. By the 1870s, the United States has a well-established postal service that reaches throughout the 38 states and into the territories. Most of the mail route territory was covered by stagecoach.
The mail would be usually under the driver, up in the front of the coach, and he would have a weapon to protect it.
He would need it. Coaches are subject to crashes, to the cold, the snow, to Indian attacks. But the mail coaches carry everything. Gold, payrolls, anything of value. West of the Mississippi, just a few postal inspectors are assigned to protect millions of square miles of mail routes. The mail is valuable, the mail is vulnerable, and everyone knows it, especially in New Mexico territory.
All right, so hold on. Everybody get your hands in the air. Throw down that mail bag.
It's 1876, and mail and pay are not getting through to the soldiers at Fort Stanton. A mysterious gang is robbing stagecoaches. Even with a shotgun rider, without local law enforcement, it's easy pickings. The robbers take the mail, clean out the passengers, and disappear.
And there were anywhere from 2 to 4 robbers. They weren't quite certain. The Army couldn't solve it.
It's a situation that will give rise to a legendary postal inspector.
They went to the Postmaster General, who said, I know just the man, General Adams. Charles Adams went into the Civil War as an officer. He fought all the way through Gettysburg and was shot badly. His lung was destroyed and his shoulder blade was blown out.
Adams' territory covers much of Colorado and New Mexico. Mostly out of touch with his superiors, Adams has wide latitude to do his job as he sees fit.
When Adams became a postal inspector, they had no such thing as an academy. He had to be self-taught. Inspectors in those days had a very small manual, but one of the things that was stressed is you are to remain silent about what means you use to accomplish the ends that were needed to solve the case.
Adams will go into the Wild West, and all he'll have to work with, his brain, a horse, and a manual that says to keep quiet.
What's going on? Ben, the U.S. stage has been robbed today.
Adams seeks volunteers from Fort Stanton for what will be a very dangerous mission.
He went to Fort Stanton, asked for the service of 2 soldiers. He proceeded down in the Seven Rivers country where it was very, very deadly.
At each stop, locals warn Adams and his posse that they're crazy to continue. The soldiers with Adams get spooked.
They kept warning him, you're going to get us killed, you can keep going further, let this go. He wouldn't do it. So they deserted and left.
Adams is on his own. But he doesn't turn back. Instead, Adams goes after the robbers by himself. All alone, using only his wits, Adams somehow tracks the robbers over open terrain. Then, he spots a small campsite. Outnumbered, Adams manages to get the drop on the robbers.
He was able to overcome them, tie them to a buckboard, drive them back up to Fort Stanton, where they were jailed.
How did he do it? No one knows. After all, the manual said to remain silent. And Adams did.
Well, I guess what Charles Adams says is that the post office, when they said they would move the mail or protect the mail, they meant exactly what they said. You couldn't have him today. He'd be impossible to control. But for those days and that time, that's a man you wanted.
Charles Adams became a legend by making the most out of a horse, a manual, and his brain. Lou DiRienzo has less territory than Adams, and the support of a network of investigators, forensic tools, and the combined knowledge of 2 centuries of history. He'll need them all to find out who killed letter carrier Clayton Smith. First, Inspector DiRienzo needs to find the gun used to kill Smith. DiRienzo returns to the scene of the shooting to try to figure out where the shot may have come from.
We went to the crime scene numerous times. I spent a lot of time there, almost daily at the crime scene. We were looking at where the shot was fired from and where he was standing, and we kept coming back to the same area, that it was likely fired from an area behind him, possibly in that apartment building or in the woods behind him.
This type of gun ejects a shell casing when a shot is fired, but a thorough search of the woods turns up nothing.
We never recovered the shell casing, which we thought was odd. The bullet did not appear to be fired from close range or point blank range. It appeared to be fired from some distance away.
Lou is convinced it is here, the apartment building that the shot must have come from.
Just the fact that where the apartment building was situated and the wound, it just kept leading us back to this area.
But the apartment building's residents had already been thoroughly interviewed and have denied everything. DiRienzo thinks somebody is hiding something.
One time we actually brought in a ATF dog that specializes in gunpowder, and the dog went through some of the apartments there looking for gunpowder residue and did not indicate anything.
For now, another dead end. Weeks pass. And then, a break in the case. A resident of the apartment building, LaToya Burnett, a mother of 2 young children, turns up at the local police to report that a gun has been stolen from her. There's only one problem. On the night of the crime, that same LaToya Burnett told Inspector DiRienzo she didn't have a gun. But she does have a live-in boyfriend with a suspicious past. His name, Larry McGirt.
We ran his criminal record, and we later found out that he had extensive criminal history, including robbery charges.
But her boyfriend McGirt has already shown investigators an airtight alibi for the night of the murder. He was at work and can prove it. A woman who lied to police about owning a gun. A felon boyfriend in possession of that gun. Lou needs to talk to LaToya Burnett. Inspectors rush to LaToya's apartment to interview her and find that after her police report, she's left town. A quick check discovers that LaToya Burnett is with her boyfriend in Durham, North Carolina. The chase is on.
That night, a group of inspectors, we get in our cars and we drive to North Carolina trying to find her.
DiRienzo manages to make contact with her boyfriend, Larry McGirt. Lou knows McGirt was at work that night and couldn't have killed Smith. But McGirt is still afraid of arrest. He offers a deal to give up the gun.
We arrange to meet him at a fast food restaurant and obtain the gun from him.
McGirt drops the gun by a dumpster. And Inspector DiRienzo makes the pickup. When DiRienzo checks out the brand of the gun, it rings a bell.
It ended up being a Brico .380 caliber gun, like the forensic pathologist said we probably would be looking for.
But how can he be sure this is the very gun used to kill Clayton Smith?
I drove it to our crime lab in Dulles.
At the Dulles Forensic Lab, the gun will be test-fired to see if it matches the gun used to kill Clayton Smith.
How are you? Fine, how are you today?
Good. I brought you the gun that we recovered down in Durham for a test fire.
Okay, we'll get it ready and then we'll test fire it and then compare the bullets on the comparison microscope upstairs.
Technicians fire the weapon into a steel-encased tank of water. Slowed by the water, the bullet falls harmlessly to the bottom of the tank, preserving the marks made on it by the gun. Now it goes upstairs to have those marks examined and compared to those on the bullet taken from Clayton Smith's body. The technician mounts both bullets under a powerful microscope and photographs the marks on each. She then lines up the images. If the lines match, the bullets were fired from the same gun.
You can see the comparison of the lines going through.
Right,
matching, yes.
Match. So it's pretty much a given, and then we can figure that the gun that we recovered was the same gun that was used to shoot the victim.
Correct. You do have a match.
Okay, that's great.
They've got the killer's weapon, but who pulled the trigger? It turns out LaToya Burnett also has an airtight alibi. She too was at work that day. But her apartment wasn't empty. Her children were home. And they've been hiding a terrible secret.
We determined that the children were likely home alone, and somehow they find the gun in her mother's bedroom.
And the boy points the gun out the window at nothing in particular and pulls the trigger. The bullet hits the letter carrier in the back, killing him.
Children being very traumatized by the whole thing, not wanting to hurt anybody. They knew the mailman. He came to their house. And they knew what had happened to him. And then they had the secret that this young boy and his sister keep while this investigation is going on.
In the end, the fatal shooting of Clayton Smith is ruled an accident. But LaToya Burnett's negligence and lack of cooperation will not go unpunished.
She was charged with both lying to the federal agents, and she was charged with felon not to possess a firearm. If she would have came forward in the initial investigation, we would have saved countless man-hours. We could have wrapped this up very quickly.
She's convicted of illegally owning a gun and lying to federal authorities and sentenced to 18 months in prison. Inspector DiRienzo knew from the beginning that this was an unusual case, because usually, when violence targets the male, the reason is money. For 2 centuries, the male was a rich target. 80 years before Clayton Smith was an even more violent story that starts on a train. October 11th, 1923, and a train is leaving Portland, Oregon, en route to California. It carries passengers, coal, and mail. By now, America's rail system has become the backbone of the Postal Service. The area it covers continues to grow. Now, with the addition of parcel post, the mail includes packages. But what kind of mail is in this train? Its name offers a hint. It's called the Gold Special.
Aboard! Aboard!
Before there were trains, it might take 40 to 60 days to get mail cross country by land. When the trains began running and carrying mail in the 1860s, we could get it across the country in about 7 days. And then by 1900, we could get it across country in 3 to 4 days, which was really good time.
By the early 1920s, the U.S. Postal Service is moving 23 billion pieces of mail, most of that by train.
A mail train was a pretty ripe target. You also had a lot of registered mail, which is essentially valuable mail. It might be money, jewels, papers, negotiable papers and bonds. So there was a real need to protect the mail on those trains. They were at risk. A mail train had lots of mail, which made your gamble. If you wanted to rob a mail train, you had a chance of a much bigger payoff.
As the gold special chugs its way through southern Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains, its crew has no idea it's about to make an unscheduled stop. As the train approaches a tunnel, it is jumped by three men who look like brothers.
Two of the brothers jumped on the train just as it entered the tunnel. The third brother waited on the other end of the tunnel.
The robbers have stopped the train with the engine sticking out of the tunnel and the mail car just inside. Now it's time to go after what they came for, the Gold Specials mail car. But there's a hitch.
The mail clerk would not open the door, steadfastly refused.
A tense standoff ensues. The robbers get impatient.
As a result, two of the brothers stacked all the dynamite they had onto the side of the mail car, the end of the mail car.
The train is in perfect position for their plan.
They wanted the engine outside of the tunnel, but they wanted the mail car, which was the third car in the line, they wanted it inside the tunnel. If you can follow their logic, because when they would use dynamite to blow the car open, they figured that the tunnel would muffle the sound of the explosion.
They figured wrong.
It not only opened the door of the mail car, it literally peeled the mail car back, blew it off the track, killed the mail clerk that was inside, sent a tremendous explosion that was heard for 40, 50 miles away.
The news gets worse for the robbers when they look in the remains of the mail car. They find that the mail clerk has been killed in the explosion, but it's what they don't find that shocks them.
The gold special carried no gold.
The robbers panic. They execute 3 crew members and run.
They take off running down the track empty-handed, leaving 4 dead bodies behind.
Blowing up a mail car and killing a postal clerk makes this a job for postal inspectors.
The first postal inspectors responding to the scene was that a postal inspector in charge, his name was Ritterford. He showed up summoning postal inspectors from all over the Northwest, who arrived within the next 24 hours. They discovered that the crime scene had been obliterated. It was completely gone.
Investigators use tracking dogs to follow the robbers' trail, but they can't get the scent. Inspector Ritterford is looking for 3 robbers who look alike, with very little physical evidence to go on.
The detonator, the plunger that was used to detonate the dynamite, that was found. There was a pair of overalls, greasy overalls, that were left behind.
The bomb components, a pair of overalls, and that's it. Postal inspectors and law enforcement from surrounding counties fan out in a massive hunt for the mysterious robbers. A manhunt that will make history.
This was without doubt the largest manhunt in the history of the United States up until that point. This is also one of the first times when aeroplanes, that's what they were called, when aeroplanes were brought in to help with the search. They literally flew over the mountaintops and the treetops. The manhunt went on for at least 3 weeks straight, night and day.
With no luck. But Inspector Ritterford has an ace up his sleeve, an eccentric professor with a nose for crime.
The lawmen took these pieces of evidence to a man they knew could provide answers to their questions. He was known as the Wizard at Berkeley, the Edison of crime detection, a Professor E.O. Heinrich.
He would become the first forensic investigator for the postal inspectors.
He's literally one of the fathers of the modern-day crime laboratory because he took it upon himself to solve crimes using science.
Examining the overalls, Heinrich turns up several clues to the owner's identity.
He found fingernail clippings in one of the pockets, which to him indicated somebody that wants to remain clean-cut.
He also finds some sandy-colored hairs on the garment.
By looking at the hairs under a microscope, he was able to determine the approximate age of the person who owned those hairs, a white male approximately 23 years of age.
Then another critical clue. What looked like a grease stain on the overalls wasn't grease at all.
It was actually pitch from fir trees. Fir trees were on the western side of Oregon, so he deduced that therefore the person wearing the overalls had worked as a lumberjack on the western side of Oregon recently. After examining the overalls, Professor Heinrich mystified law enforcement, including the postal inspectors, when he gave what he considered to be an accurate, full description of the robber.
Postal inspectors have a description. A clean-cut lumberjack from western Oregon in his early 20s with sandy hair. But then the professor makes an even more definitive discovery.
Inside the pin pocket of the overalls at the very bottom was a tiny piece of paper rolled up in a ball. When he unrolled the piece of paper, he discovered it was a registered mail receipt coming out of Eugene, Oregon. That was a tremendous lead for the postal inspectors.
Inspector Ritterford quickly traces the piece of mail to a young man named Roy D'Autremont, 19 years old, sandy hair, a one-time lumberjack from western Oregon, just like the professor predicted. And when Ritterford looks into Roy D'Autremont, he discovers Roy always has company.
Roy had a twin brother, an identical twin named Ray, and that Ray and Roy had been seen in town recently with still a younger brother named Hugh, and that those three had been inseparable.
Inspectors now have names and faces. They blanket Oregon, California, and eventually the whole country with over 2 million wanted posters. And after 4 years of searching, the inspectors' work pays off. A private in the Army recognizes the face. He's served with Hugh D'Autremont in the Philippines.
So Postal Inspector Fred Smith was put on a steamer from San Francisco out to the Philippines. It took him over a month to get there. He had an interview that lasted about 5 minutes before Hugh admitted, "Yes, I'm Hugh D'Autremont."
The three brothers are quickly captured, put on trial, and in a plea bargain, spared the gallows. In June 1927, they are sentenced to life in prison. Inspector DiRienzo knows that throughout history, the postal inspectors have made a habit of getting their man. But murders are not common crimes for postal inspectors. Since the beginning, the real temptation has been the one that motivated the D'Autremont brothers: robbery. But some of the postal inspectors' most famous cases have involved a variation on that theme. Money for practically nothing. Fraud. Perhaps the greatest fraud of all was by a man whose last name would become synonymous with something called a pyramid scheme. His name, Charles Ponzi. World War I is over, leaving Europe in ruins. Immigrants pour into the United States, seeking their fortunes. But some are trying to get rich quicker than others. In 1917, an Italian immigrant named Charles Ponzi settles in Boston. In 1919, he receives a letter that launches an idea for the largest get-rich-quick scheme in history, an 8-month run that will take postal inspectors to unravel.
He received a letter from someone in Spain who requested a reply back.
As return postage, the sender uses something called an international reply coupon, allowing the recipient to mail a letter back to the sender at a fixed rate.
This is an international reply coupon from 1920. And Ponzi noticed that it was worth about 6 cents in the United States. And in Spain, it only cost the man about 1 cent. This created an opportunity to cash international reply coupons from other countries in the United States or countries where the currency was high and make a profit.
And he explained it, and it sounded very logical. You buy a stamp in Spain for 1 cent, you get 6 cents worth of stamp in the United States. So he set up a company called Securities Exchange, the securities being the international reply coupons. And he says, I can give you 50% return in 45 days.
That's far more than anyone else can offer. More than a bank, more than a stockbroker. It's December 1919, and what Ponzi offers seems too good to be true. Within days, his storefront is mobbed with hopeful immigrants sinking their every dollar into the Ponzi scheme.
Ponzi should have taken the money and run early on. It only went on about 8 months. He took in about $15 million.
But instead, Ponzi keeps on collecting money and even conspicuously paying off those who choose to cash in.
There were no victims early on. No one was unhappy with Ponzi because he was paying exactly as he said he was.
But even as he pays out, Ponzi talks investors into putting it right back. Millions roll in. And whenever he enters his offices, he's mobbed by Bostonians trying to give him their money. Until the postal inspectors arrive. They have a few questions. It sounds logical. He could buy something in Europe for $1 and sell it in America for $6. It seems foolproof, but not to postal inspectors.
The postal inspectors became suspicious, but they found out as to match the amount of money he claimed he was making, he would have had to purchase 180 million international reply coupons.
Which poses a simple math problem. There are not nearly enough coupons in the world to keep Ponzi's promises.
By anyone's estimation, there were never more than about 30,000 postal reply coupons in circulation at any one time. That's only about $1,500 for everything that was available in the world.
$1,500 worth of coupons are financing a $15 million enterprise with tens of thousands of investors. Ponzi has committed no crime. Not yet. But on April 19, 1920, postal inspectors officially notify Ponzi. Reply coupons are not legal tender and cannot be used as the basis of speculation. Ponzi shrugs it off. And his business takes off. In June 1920, his company takes in $2.5 million. The next month, it nearly triples. His office is mobbed. When anyone tries to cash out, Ponzi personally talks them into reinvesting. If he actually had to pay everyone, Ponzi's scheme would collapse. His charm keeps him solvent.
He was a very charming man. He wasn't real tall, but he was attractive. He smiled. He was always optimistic. You know, great day, how you doing? Slapping you on the back. He was a very likable man. The police liked him, and believe it or not, quite a few Boston police did put money into his scheme. And so he would use that. You know, the police are putting money in. Hey, look, there's a bank president putting money in.
Only the postal inspectors know that the Ponzi scheme is a house of cards until the press starts writing about it.
There was a news report published that was very critical of the Ponzi investment scheme. and it caused a run on Ponzi's business. People were lining up to cash their coupons. But again, Ponzi was such a salesman, he worked the crowd. He paid everyone that asked for a refund.
When investigators demand an audit of his business, Ponzi shocks them by accepting their offer.
When they asked to, the estate asked to audit his books, he should have said no. He said, go right ahead.
Ponzi is starting to believe his own sales pitch.
The auditor found that his liabilities far exceeded his assets, and that's when a criminal complaint was written up for mail fraud.
August 13th, 1920, Friday the 13th. Ponzi is arrested for mail fraud. He's sentenced to 5 years in prison, but his charm still works its magic.
When he was sent to prison, people sent money to Ponzi saying, when you get out, please invest this for me.
Postal inspectors have headed off what could have been a financial calamity. Instead of a disaster befalling tens of thousands, one immigrant who believed in the American dream but had no concept of what it really meant goes to jail. Inspector DiRienzo knows that as long as there's been a postal system, people have tried to use it to steal, to swindle, to defraud. But as the technology has become more sophisticated, criminals have begun seeing the mail not just as a means to make money, but as a method for murder, long distance. November 19th, 2003, Leaper, Pennsylvania. A postal customer has been sent a package he thinks is a bomb. It has too much postage and is leaking an oily black substance. Incredibly, he has brought the bomb with him to the post office.
Hey, I got this in the mail. I think it might be a bomb.
Okay, sir, leave it right
The postmaster immediately shuts down the office and calls postal inspectors.
It was wrapped in brown craft paper, had a string around it, and it was leaking a black powder.
Inspectors converge on Leaper in a special vehicle known as the War Wagon.
This is the Dangerous Mail Investigation Response Vehicle, also known as a War Wagon. In this vehicle, we have various equipment that we use to respond to post offices or other facilities to identify or isolate suspicious packages in mail. And here we have a hazmat ID kit. We can use this to differentiate between, say, a white powder being either anthrax or coffee creamer. We have a multi-ray detector. We have a Ludlam detector we use for detecting radiation. We also have other equipment in here that we might use for raids, such as a shotgun, fire extinguishers, different entry tools.
But today they will be using an X-ray machine to examine the suspicious package.
We isolate the package, we place the imager behind the package, we place the X-ray source in front of the package. We then have a cord that goes from the imager. This runs to a laptop. We run this to a safe distance away. From the X-ray image, we can tell this is a dangerous device. You can see a mouse trap, which likely is the trigger for this device, and we see some other items through here, looks to be BBs, probably to be used as shrapnel.
Inspectors call the local bomb squad, who will render the device safe while preserving it enough for the postal inspectors to investigate. The bomb squad sets up a small water cannon, which will fire a shotgun round of water into the device and interrupt the firing chain.
We're going to do a shot on the package here, basically do a general disruption. We're going to use a water cannon, and basically that water is going to propel and open the package up for us.
It'll disrupt the firing chain.
Absolutely, that's what we're going to try to do here.
But we'll still have some evidence it looks like that we can use in.
Absolutely, we'll be able to gather all that and take care of it.
Fire in the hole! 3, 2, 1.
We're going to bag this stuff up and send it out to Dulles, our crime lab in Dulles.
The bomb goes to the lab in Dulles, while Inspector DiRienzo returns to Pittsburgh to interview the intended victim, Ray Kodomensky, to see if he can figure out who would mail him a bomb. It turns out there's one obvious suspect, a man who has been seeing Kodomensky's girlfriend.
He's involved with a girl, and there's another man involved with this girl as well.
The other man in this love triangle is Robert Reichard, and over the past few months, Kodomensky has received a series of threatening letters he thinks are from him. The Dulles Crime Lab will determine if that's true. Technicians painstakingly dismantle and catalog every item in the bomb, careful not to miss a single detail.
We can tell right away that it's relatively crude. He's utilized a mouse trap. He's got a striker plate here. He's got some brass screws. He may have cut the ends of the nails off. He's attached some safety matches to it. Not your typical safety matches, more along the lines of what you might find to light a fireplace.
Inspector DiRienzo now has a shopping list for when he searches Reichard's house. Fireplace matches, brass screws, black powder, clipped nails. If DiRienzo can find any of these objects, he can arrest Robert Reichard for sending a mail bomb. Now postal inspectors secure a federal warrant to search the home of Robert Reichard.
They're related to the search warrant.
They head straight for his workbench.
In this case, this gentleman had somehow been involved in the hardware industry, and he had a garage full of hardware.
They cart off his vacuum cleaner for trace evidence. And that's not all they take away.
At the scene of the search warrant, we found many components that match the components that were in the actual bomb. We found hardware. We found matches. We found string. We found mouse traps.
At the Dulles Crime Lab, technicians pore over the evidence collected from the vacuum cleaner bag and the workbench to find exact matches to the components of the mail bomb.
I found powder that was consistent with the powder that was employed in the device. I found little pieces of wood that are pretty consistent with the matches, the sticks from the matches. From the vacuumings, I found a little nail head that was clipped off from what was sticking through.
And when that tiny piece of clipped nail is examined under a microscope, investigators find a perfect fit to a piece of the mail bomb.
The way he cut the nail, I was actually able to go back and physically fit this end back to the nail that was used in the device.
DiRienzo now has enough to make an arrest. When presented with the evidence against him, Robert Reichard gives in. He confesses to sending the device through the mail. But his attorney argues that the device was only a hoax, not intended to injure Kodomensky. But investigators simulate what would happen if a device like Reichard's was opened. Reichard ultimately pleads guilty to a federal charge of sending a bomb through the mail and is sentenced to 5 years. Even before America was born, the mail formed its backbone. The network that moved money, opened the paths of communication, and paved the way for the rise of a nation. But the mail has always been, and will continue to be, a tantalizing target for rogues and criminals. And since the beginning, it's been the job of the postal inspectors to stop them. Lou DiRienzo is building on a long legacy. The amazing history of the Silent Service.